Okay, thank you everyone for being here today. Thank you to the Tesla Science Foundation for inviting me to speak. My presentation today is entitled, The Dark Side of Tesla's Technology. We all know the vision that Tesla had planned for the world, free energy and free communications. And had his vision come true, the world would be a lot different of a place today. Well, what I want to talk about here today is how some of Tesla's greatest inventions that we think never came to fruition actually have come to fruition, but in the hands of people who he never intended that technology to be in the hands of, and has been used in ways that Tesla never intended to be used. And this is what it's been used to do, to create a world that is basically on lockdown and under complete control. To understand how Tesla's technology was weaponized, we have to understand two main points of Tesla's experiments and research. And that is his experiments in vibration and resonance and his experimentation with scalar wave technology, which I'll get into in a bit. Tesla's experiments with vibration and resonance is this section, and Tesla is renowned for his extensive experiments with mechanical vibrations and resonance. In 1898, he was experimenting with an electromagnetic oscillator. Attaching the oscillator to a structural beam of his loft building, Tesla turned it on and began making observations and taking notes. Unfortunately, Tesla was unaware that amplified vibrations from the oscillator were traveling through the beam and into the substructure of Manhattan in all directions. Nearby buildings shook, windows shattered, and people poured into the streets believing an earthquake was taking place. Finally, realizing what was happening, Tesla smashed the oscillator and put an end to the experiment. Tesla later described another experiment he conducted with a mechanical oscillator about the size of an alarm clock. He attached it to a steel beam which was 2 feet long and 2 inches thick. Tesla described the results. For a long time, nothing happened. But at last, the great steel link began to tremble, increased its trembling until it dilated and contracted like a beating heart and finally broke. Sledgehammers could not have done it, but a fusillade of taps, none of which would have harmed a baby, did it. Now imagine a steel beam 2 feet long and 2 inches thick. And Tesla broke that with a simple mechanical oscillator. He decided to take his experiments with vibration and resonance to a new level by attaching one of these oscillators to a steel beam of a partially constructed skyscraper near Wall Street. He described the experiment. In a few minutes, I could feel the beam trembling. Gradually, the trembling increased in intensity and extended throughout the whole great mass of steel. Finally, the structure began to creak and weave, and the steel workers came down to the ground panic-stricken, believing there had been an earthquake. Rumors spread that the building was about to fall. Before anything serious happened, I took off the vibrator, put it in my pocket, and went away. But if I had kept on 10 minutes more, I could have laid that building flat in the street. And with the same vibrator, I could drop the Brooklyn Bridge in less than an hour. This is with a simple mechanical oscillator. Tesla continuously touted the awesome potential of mechanical resonance. He once told newspaper reporters that, using one of his oscillator devices, he would be able to, quote, reduce the Empire State Building to a tangled mass of wreckage in a very short time. Pay attention to this part of the description, folks. First, the outer stone coating of the skyscraper would be hurled off. Then the whole vast skeleton of steel, the pride and glory of the Manhattan skyline, would collapse. The next part of Tesla's technology that we have to understand that has been essentially used in ways it was never intended to be used by the great inventor was scalar waves. Tesla was the rediscoverer of scalar waves. In 1899, Tesla rediscovered scalar waves and conducted experiments with them in his laboratory in Colorado Springs. Scalar waves flow at right angles to electromagnetic waves. They're considered to be finer than gamma rays or X-rays. They belong to the subtle gravitational field. and are also known as gravitic waves or longitudinal waves. Many scientists and researchers today refer to them simply as Tesla waves. As a result of his Colorado Springs experiments, Tesla learned how to harness scalar waves from one transmitter to another without using any wires. Tesla later, of course, built a prototype of this magnifying transmitter at Shoreham, Long Island, New York. As we all know, Tesla's funding for this project was revoked after his main financial backer, J.P. Morgan, realized that Tesla's world wireless system would destroy his business profits by allowing people to tap into quote-unquote free energy at no cost. Tesla later discovered that scalar energy becomes bottled from the intersection of two scalar waves. Through interferometry, a technique of crossing scalar wave beams, large standing waves could be combined to produce a focused beam of extremely powerful energy. Several scalar waves sent from different transmitters could also be combined by this technique of interferometry to produce a plasma bottle of very high contained energy. This bottle or shield, it became known as a Tesla shield, could be moved around the planet at will, and the bottled energy could even be detonated remotely. If detonated in the Earth, an earthquake would be the result. If detonated in a building or a city, the result would be a violent explosion akin to a miniature nuclear explosion without any resulting radiation, which would disintegrate all matter within the quote-unquote bottle. And there's a newspaper clipping regarding Tesla's so-called death ray, death beam. Tesla's so-called death ray could literally project the energy of a nuclear warhead and direct it to any location in the world. Some say the massive explosion in Tunguska, Siberia in 1908 may have been due to a test of this technology. The force of the Tunguska explosion was estimated to have been 10 to 15 megatons. The blast flattened 500,000 acres of forest. It is conjectured that Tesla may have been trying to break ice at the polar circle during this test and may have overshot his target. Tesla considered further experimentation with scalar wave technology too dangerous for obvious reasons. He knew that scalar waves could be used to create man-made earthquakes or to create remote disintegration weapons. This is why he made the decision before his death to divide his lifelong research over multiple locations in different countries. That way, no one country could gain a power advantage over the rest of the world by weaponizing technology based on his research. After his death in 1943, the FBI and other intelligence agencies in the United States were actively involved in confiscating and suppressing many of Tesla's documents, including plans for his, quote, death ray weapon and his earthquake machine, deeming them top secret lest they fall into, quote, enemy hands. And it is my contention that this technology did, in fact, fall into enemy hands called the United States government. And it was used on September 11th, 2001. Now, before you scoff at this, take a look at some of the evidence I'll present here today. The first thing I'll ask people is, if you never saw the events of 2011 or heard the official explanations as were given to us by the government and the mainstream media, and you took a look at these following pictures, would you yourself describe that as a collapse?
No way.
Or would you look at that and say, that is more akin to an explosion, a massive explosion, in fact, a disintegration? Are we witnessing a collapse there, or is that the building being disintegrated? What kind of energy is required? As scientists who may be out there listening, is the potential energy in a building of the mass of the World Trade Center and the force due to gravity and some burning kerosene enough to produce that kind of kinetic energy? Once again, the question I ask people to honestly ask themselves, if you did not hear the official narrative and knew nothing about the events of that day, would you describe what you are seeing there as a collapse? That's all I ask. This is a very brilliant woman who I highly suggest everyone really look into the empirical data that she has presented in her book. This is Dr. Judy Wood. She wrote a book called Where Did the Towers Go? Evidence of Directed Free Energy Technology on 9/11. Everybody in this room should read this book and pay close attention to the evidence that Judy Wood presents. And she doesn't really jump to a lot of conclusions. The book is really a book of evidence that she presents. I highly recommend people checking it out. Here is another big part of the evidence, and I want to recall your attention to when Tesla said if he let his oscillator go, it would rip away the stone structure, or the concrete structure of the building first, then it would disintegrate the steel and bring it down in a collapse. This video is Judy Wood speaking about a phenomenon that was observed in World Trade Center 1 when it collapsed, called the spire, which was 70 stories of steel that remained standing after the concrete structure peeled away like a banana.
Now we're going to look from B1 and B2 positions, as well as from C, at what's referred to as the spire. There's that clump of core columns from Tower 1 that seems to remain just a little bit after the rest and then turns to dust. I'm sort of expecting that or suspicious that is right above where those 14 people survived, who thought they would have been crushed and looked up and saw blue sky. Here's Tower 1 coming apart, and it peels away like peeling a banana, and left with these little spires sticking up. That's about 700 feet tall. It's got to be pretty strong to be standing unsupported that tall. Here's Building 7, which is a 47-story building. It's like 650 feet tall, approximately. This has got to be over that. And here's a closer view, and then it starts to drop down and kind of faints, turns to dust. Now, if that thing tipped over, it would take out a few blocks worth of buildings. How's it going to go straight down? You got a 700-foot hole in the ground to drop it into? Okay, for argument's sake, let's pretend we do have a 700-foot hole we're going to drop it into. And you're saying that that's dust that shook off it that settled back here? That's blue sky around that. That's not dust gradually settling. If dust is that fine to hang in the air, it wouldn't be settled on it in that amount of time. So we know it doesn't have much time at all for dust to settle on it.
Now pay very close attention to this part coming up where they show the disintegration of the spire.
You'll just faint. Just faints and dustifies. Pretty neat trick. Now we're going to look at still frames from yet a different position. Remember, it peels away like a banana, leaves it exposed, blue sky, crisp edges. That's not dust settling on it. And then it comes to the point where it no longer has crisp edges and dustifies.
Those were core columns.
Now we're looking at it from across the river.
Some of the thickest steel beams ever manufactured in North America.
You can see it turning to dust. Now it isn't tipping over in any particular direction.
Also, when you look at the debris pile, there's not enough matter to account for the mass of the buildings.
The cloud is sort of wrapping around this building. It's a little bit more wrapped around. So you can tell there's not much time has passed between those two images.
Here are those core columns still standing, 700 feet in the air. Is that a collapse or a disintegration? People will ask why. That's the big question whenever you bring up that this may have been a deliberately pre-planned event. And I would say there's lots of reasons for false flag terror attacks, for false flag terror events. First of all, it's to inject fear into the public consciousness. When people are in fear, they don't make good decision-making processes, and they're willing to listen to whatever a so-called savior comes along and tries to tell them to do, first of all. Well, we've gone into other countries and waged wars of aggression to seize resources. You know, this so-called never-ending war on terror and the fear that it produces, a whole new department of Homeland Security, akin to the Gestapo of Nazi Germany. You know, all the subsequent losses of civil liberties that went along with it and the rising militarization of the police. There's lots of reasons for false flag attacks. Again, I highly recommend everyone to check out this book by Judy Wood, Where Did the Towers Go? Her research is great. She also has a phenomenal YouTube video called The New Hiroshima, which I highly recommend. For the more technically inclined and scientific among us, this is a gentleman whose work I highly recommend, Dr. Thomas Bearden. And he has done extensive work about scalar interferometry. Also, you could look at how this technology can be weaponized in different ways, such as modification of weather and the production of artificial earthquakes. If you don't know about HAARP, I'm sure most people here do. It's the High Altitude Active Auroral Research Project in Alaska. It's another thing to definitely research when it comes to how scalar wave technology has been used for all the wrong reasons. And for more information on false flag events, false flag terror events, and how they have been historically used to sway populations in a certain direction, you could check out the new documentary that I appear in from Free Mind Films called Shadow Ring. Highly recommend the documentary. It's very, very well done, and it explains in depth what false flags are and how they've been used historically. If we're ever going to see Tesla's technology used for the right reasons, the way the great inventor envisioned them for our world, as freeing technologies that would unite people, we have to understand what the potential of this technology was. And that means even looking at all the horrible ways that it could be used in the wrong hands. I think the real answer is to truly educate people about what is possible and to truly educate our young about what Tesla really wanted to do with these technologies. And that starts with the education in the school systems, teaching children about Tesla, his visions for our world, and what he really wanted to accomplish. And his legacy is left unfinished for us to complete and for us to do it in the right way toward freedom and the advancement of humanity. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks so much for your kind attention.